All right, welcome everyone to Transcendent Philosophy. This is Seth here, and today we are going to be discussing AI, robots, free will, consciousness, agency, all that type of crazy stuff. And we've got our guest here today, Bryan. Hey, what's up, Bryan?
Hey, how you doing, Seth?
Doing good.
All
Do you
right.
want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure, sounds great. So my name's Brian Slan. I have a bachelor's in behavior science. My passions are psychology, behavior science, philosophy, uh, and any of that kind of stuff. I really get into a lot. Um, I'm a moderator for No Free Will page. Yeah. So that's one of my real big passions. So.
Nice. Yeah, we met through that group on Facebook and
Mhm.
had some good conversations. And we also had the phone call recently where we discussed kind of the philosophy of mind and how it relates to algorithms and AI. So I thought to kick off this conversation, it might be interesting to rehash our last conversation and kind of move from there.
Sounds great.
Yeah, so we were talking about whether or not AI can actually, consciously understand what it's doing, specifically in kind of this linguistic context, right? GPT, it passes the Turing test as far as I'm concerned. The Turing test, it's basically, does it seem like you're interacting with a human, right? Can you tell the difference between a human and the algorithm,
Mm,
right?
mm,
So it's kind of operating at human level capacities for interaction purposes.
mhm.
And so the question is, if it can speak like a human, if it can write like a human, does that mean it can understand like a human? What do you think?
Um, I think so. Yeah, I know. That's a lot. It's a lot. Um, and I've always said that because I think we're meat robots, right?
I
Human,
agree.
humans are based. We have functioning just like computers. Sad to say, I mean, but it's the same. It's the same thing, and well, we're reinforcement based. So the things that we get reinforced, we tend to do those things over and over again. This is operant conditioning. Um, Also, AI works from a reinforcement learning over and over again. It's always getting that kind of reinforcement. Um, so basically, the law of effect is the effects of our actions determine whether we repeat them or not. So, and I see similar things happening with AI based on what I'm saying here. So yeah, I mean, I think you can make a case that it can understand. Yeah.
Right. So it seems like you operate from kind of this functional paradigm
Hmm.
of consciousness, wherein if it has the functions, then it necessarily has the conscious experience. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, in our last conversation, I brought up the Chinese room thought experiment as a challenge to this functionalist paradigm for consciousness. So, I kind of want to rehash that and get you to respond. So, just to explain the Chinese room thought experiment, it's the idea that there is a Westerner who is inside of this room, and this Westerner, it is his job to answer questions with the Chinese language. So he receives a Chinese question and he responds in Chinese, but the Westerner does not understand Chinese. So how does he do this, right? So he's got a book, and the book is his instruction manual. It's like an algorithmic rule book for how to process Chinese questions and how to answer Chinese questions. And maybe there's a grid, right? There's a grid of Chinese characters. Like page one, it lists out, character, A1, A2, A3, A4. And so he's scanning this grid. He's looking, okay, so he receives a question, right? There's a slot in the room on the wall. There's a slot where questions are fed into the slot. So someone outside the room, a Chinese person, they write down a question on a piece of paper. Chinese characters. They feed it into the room. So this Westerner takes the slip of paper and he looks at the characters. And then he goes to his rulebook and he tries to find the characters. Okay, I found character A3, I found character B4, I found character C7, and he builds a sentence. And then he goes to the rules, and the rule book says if you have A3, B4, C7, then respond with, D12, E13, and F14, and that's the response. So he's like writing down an answer to the question. He outputs it through the slot, and the Chinese person receives the answer. And as far as the Chinese person is concerned, it functions as coherently as a Chinese speaker. And so there's the illusion that someone inside the room understands Chinese, right? Mm-hmm. And so the thought experiment is trying to it's trying to draw a line between function and understanding. Where the Westerner, they function as if they understand Chinese, but in actuality, they don't.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's really... See, now you got me thinking about it again. So there, and behaviorally, if you can create an association between the message that's coming in and then the coding itself, right? So that's really where we're not even talking about the outputs. The outputs at this point don't matter. What matters is only the input and the behavior that's happening there. And those two would create associations. And so even though, let's say, maybe it doesn't necessarily understand the meaning of particular symbols that are being created there, it would be able to have a kind of function of what I'm supposed to do under these contexts, if that makes sense.
The function is definitely there.
Right.
The function is there. The challenging question is, does function imply understanding, specifically conscious understanding?
Right. And so from here, you could say, okay, so once you develop a system of functioning, you can say that under this particular context, this is what happens. And so you create this. And anytime you bring in some context, then you can provide the output of this is what happens based on your prior learning, right? Mm-hmm. So whatever we're pairing together at first, that's going to be what's learned. And then later on, say a year from now or something, someone provides some context, some question, and it's basically relatively the same context that it was learned before. That's what it's going to put out. So in this sense, you can say that is understanding, right? Because it's taking what was learned before, mm-hmm. and then I don't mean understanding as in meaning. I mean understanding as in function, right? So that because of what I learned before, mm-hmm. and this is what was reinforced, and so therefore that is going to be the output. Those are going to be the functions that occur from that. So yeah, mm-hmm. So in a way it does understand. There's some kind of understanding that's happening there.
Yeah, it's such a tricky question because it kind of attacks it kind of goes straight to the heart of what is consciousness in the first place.
Right.
So yeah, if it might challenge, I guess, different paradigms of consciousness might have different feelings or thoughts or intuitions about how this works in the Chinese room thought experiment.
So yeah, and it would also, so if you could get like another, so for example, if you could create a full equivalence class. So what that means is, so right now, when you're just providing some kind of input, and then you have an associated behavior with that, you're only creating a stimulus pairing. There's only two stimuli that are getting paired there. Now, if you can create an object or some kind of meaning to those words and pair those together with those other two stimuli, then you can create what we call an equivalence class, which provides meaning. So this is kind of like where meaning derives from, value derives from, and that kind of stuff. So when we're looking at all of the different types of stimuli that are being pumped into they're the equivalence class that they have is probably enormous, right? I mean, you're taking all of the knowledge of And so it's you talk about justice. If you just ask it, say, tell me about justice, it'll give you a whole list of all these things, the different types of justices, and theories and philosophies, and so what that shows is that it is creating these kind of equivalent classes, just from putting all this learning and the associations that are going together. And so from that, and to me, what is understanding is that you can behave how you learned in another context later temporally, so in a different time period, right? So if I go somewhere else and someone says, hey Brian, what's 2 plus 2? I'm like, man, it's 4. I'm like, yeah, because I learned that when I was in grade school. And so being able to apply these things different, in different times, in different contexts, shows us that there is some kind of understanding. That's how I would. Yeah.
All right. So I kind of, I mean, we're already talking about this. I kind of want to bring up a friend's perspective on consciousness because
Sure.
it seems kind of relevant. But yeah, I guess you'll have to wait for me a second. But
Yeah.
when it comes to this equivalence class, you're talking about how like things can be associated such that they are equal in terms of meaning. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So I can break it down a little bit more. So let's say you take the word water and an object water, so we'll say a written word and a vocal word and the object water. And in equivalent, you just take the vocal word and the object and you pair them together, right? And you say, okay, the vocal word is equal to the object. And then you take the written word and you say, now the written word is equal to the vocal word. Okay. In training, what happens is that the written word, which was not associated with the object, they automatically become connected. And this is what we call derived relations. This is why the brain just does its thing. It just goes and goes and goes because it's always just deriving relations. Some things that aren't necessarily taught, right? That's what they call epiphany. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I had my brain thought of that, right? So and so that's what equivalence class is just creating this organizational system of meaning and value. And so it all in humans it's a little bit different. Well, I can't really speak for AI, but in humans the words and the spoken words and the objects all carry a kind of value that can be established in motivating operations. And what that means is that if I'm thirsty, or let's actually back up a little bit. So let's say I'm kind of deprived a little bit of water, and someone, I see a sign that says water, and I'm like, oh, I'm kind of thirsty because it'll elicit some kind of response in me. Or if I hear someone saying water, or if I see some water flowing, those kind of things can actually, they'll elicit your behavior and cause you to respond. And so those values actually within those equivalent classes have real meaning. And the meaning, if I said, hey, Seth, hand me a bottle of water, you would know
Mm-hmm.
exactly what I mean. You would hand me the water. You wouldn't hand me a pop. You wouldn't, and same thing if I wrote us, let's say we're in some kind of convention or something, and I wrote a letter to you, hey, hand me a bottle of water. You would be able to hand me that water because in all those contexts, they're all equivalent. So, and that's kind of what it means.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Now, in terms of this functional paradigm of consciousness, I guess part of like it kind of leads me to question things like headaches, right?
Mm,
It's some I don't know if you experience headaches. I get migraines, so I spend more time than I'd like pondering the nature of a headache.
mm,
I guess the question would be: it seems like the headache is divorced from function, right? It's like you're not doing anything. It's just you're in pain, and it's kind of
mhm.
like a brute fact. You know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
this brute conscious experience that
Mhm.
it's not really tethered to any goal or any action.
Hmm.
How do you process that in a functionalist paradigm?
How do I process that? Well, so we talk about qualia just in general.
I we could go in general, but for this
Mm,
example, we're talking about pain, right?
pain and a headache. So I mean, how would I describe pain? mean, obviously, that's evolutionary. There's some kind of, our neurons and
Mhm.
everything that allows us to feel the pain, which AI obviously doesn't have. If it did, then maybe it would feel some pain if we give it some receptors or something. I'm not sure about that, but um, yeah, I mean that's the hard problem. Like consciousness is a difficult one. And that's the reason why it's a hard problem, right? So,
Right,
mm,
right.
yeah.
I mean, it's interesting you say that it requires receptors. So here's a question. Why does AI need receptors to feel pain, but it doesn't need receptors to feel understanding?
Because understanding, so you have the phenomenal and then the computational aspects of,
Yes.
right. So there's
Yes.
two different types of, you have your the sensory inputs that come through. It's kind of like the environment works on us. So we don't really, we always think that we're these independent organisms that are working on the environment, which is kind of true. It's a bidirectional process. But
Sure.
from my the way that I like to perceive it is it's more of the environment. The sunlight that's coming in is things that are being captured by my receptors and then processed computationally through my cognitive system, my brain. And
Mhm.
then it's creating these I think the memory theory of consciousness is correct. It creates a memory of it puts all of this stuff together and creates
Mhm.
those kind of representations or whatever it might be. But
All right, I want to read something to you. This is what a friend wrote
mhm,
on. I really love the way he worded this.
okay.
So, in talking about consciousness, he says, I agree that the self is an illusion. I guess maybe the heart of the question for me is why sensations? Why colors? Why sounds? Why all of this qualia when binary data, algorithms, and electrical signals are entirely sufficient to describe the process in its entirety? Qualia are like the language that the brain has made in order to communicate with itself. Instead of words or numbers, it's somehow created this entirely new category of messages that are nowhere to be found in the mathematical or physical description of the universe.
Mhm.
Is that
Yeah, that's
was
pretty,
that?
and it's powerful. It's powerful.
Mhm.
And so from a functional perspective, right, you take evolution into account here. You would say that the different signals that are being applied to the organism
Mhm.
are shaping the organism. So, sound was over time created eardrums. Sense over time, different types of physical properties of sense for whatever reason created the sensory receptors for smell and
Mhm.
so on and so forth. And so because the you can imagine where um on the very far spectrums of things. So if you go all the way out to where pain does actually hurt the organism, and let's say it's a real strong smell, so there would be actually a functional reason for why we would want receptors to be able to smell if that thing that was smelling like this caused us pain. And so I think those associations over time is kind of, and to me, you can go all the way back to like movement of like single cell organisms where,
Mhm.
like they find food and that
Mhm.
reinforces their behavior. It's like this, this ability to capture the energy that's out there, right? To self procreate.
So yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I
Mhm,
feel like we need to. I guess what my friend is saying,
mhm.
it's kind of we're basically talking about the philosophic zombie argument, right?
The self. Okay.
So the
Right.
philosophic zombie argument is it makes sense that like agents, like humanoid agents,
Mhm.
like conceptually, like we can imagine a different world in which we evolved without qualia. There's no such thing as color, there's no such thing as smell, because we're just algorithmically processing. It's like, okay, we input some frequencies, we output some behavior, right?
Yep.
We
Yep.
We input some chemical reactions, we output some behavior. So, and with robots, in my opinion, robots are the quintessential philosophic zombie, right? We
Okay.
can make robots, and the robots, they do all these functions, but as I would see it, we have no justification for saying that the robots understand color. We have no justification for saying they understand smell. So to me, there's a difference between the computational function and the
Mm-hmm.
qualitative function, the qualia function, right?
I see.
So do you have any, does the philosophic zombie argument give you any pause on this question?
Mm, I think it has to be all wrapped up together into the functions. It's like drawing that equivalence class again from qualia into particular stimuli, which, and so it
Mm-hmm.
might help to go back and talk about the self and the being an illusion, because I don't necessarily believe that. So,
Oh, okay.
right. So now I do believe that kind of, but not. It's not like So when I'm using my language is controlled by context, by reinforcement, and everything else, and so it's just like any other behavior. And so I perceive what I think is that those are also myself. Like I am what I think. I think therefore I am whatever. Um, and so I do believe that there is a self, in a sense that we have perspectives. Right, I have a perspective that I'm sitting on this couch and you're sitting on yours. Right, we can differentiate between space and time, here and there, then and now, and perspectives. And we learn this at a very young age. This is, around 2 or 3, we learn the differences between me and you. And so, what I think is that whole perspective, everything that's within that is just you. That's yourself. And now, whether there is a real self, that maintains over time, well, I mean, that's debate. Obviously that's not the case. I'm not the same. Definitely a little different than I was before when I was 3 years old. So,
It sounds like you're talking about the ship of theses argument
yeah,
in philosophy. That's how we change over time. Our identity kind of changes as we change.
sure, absolutely, 100%. Hmm.
So, when it comes to the question of the self, I often think of the self as algorithmic, right? So,
Okay.
our brain has all these algorithms, and to the extent to the extent that there's kind of like an internal harmony in the algorithms,
Hmm.
then I guess I kind of view that as the self. Like we are the algorithm.
Yeah,
Like that's the I.
yeah,
Does
I
that
can
seem
agree with that.
reasonable?
Yeah, that sounds very reasonable. Yeah.
And sometimes people say, well, do you have control? Do you have self control, right? And I think that the algorithms have control on the behavior. And
Hmm.
so if you are the algorithm, you have control.
Hmm.
So like I think self control is a reasonable concept.
Yeah, it's very interesting because a lot of people get really messed up on this from a determined perspective.
Mhm.
And I find it very, and it's a very nuanced position that we're talking about self-control and determinism, because
Yeah.
there it's just like stimuli in the environment control your behavior. Right, I get hot and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'm gonna go turn on the air conditioner. That's a form of self-control, in a sense. Behavioralism says that self-control is behavior that is applied to another behavior. So for like setting an alarm, writing some notes for what kind of food I'm going to get, a grocery list.
Uh,
So that's kind of what self-control is from a behavior science perspective. But there's no difference when the algorithms are running and we're applying different algorithms to the ones that just ran. Right, so you play video games and you move around, the character moves around and you die, and the next time you don't do the same thing. Well, that's kind of self-control. And just because I think it's a lot.
with some reinforcement, right? Some
Yeah,
learning.
punishment, reinforcement. That's right. Yeah, exactly.
You gotta change the behavior
Yeah,
because you got punished for bad
yeah,
behavior last time.
that's right. And
Yeah.
I just don't see the big. It was kind of like I wrote the other day. I said, hey, I said a puppet who responds to his own strings is still a puppet, right?
Yeah.
You're still just because you can respond to them and you're aware of
Mm.
them, that doesn't make you free of anything. Yeah.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah. There's no ultimate freedom. There's
mm,
no ultimate self control. But like if you take the context out, the
mhm,
bigger the context, the less freedom. The smaller the context, the more control, the more
mhm.
self. So that's kind of the issue as I see it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But okay, going back to the philosophic zombie
Mhm,
question.
mhm,
So my friend, he's talking about how it seems like biological organisms, it seems like we invented a language for talking to ourselves, right? So like think of your body.
mhm,
Your body is a bunch of independent cells, right?
mhm,
So like imagine like a bacteria colony, right? You've got different bacteria like thinking of your own cells as independent life forms. Like you're this big blob of bacteria. And then the question is, why does this bacteria cooperate with this bacteria, cooperate with this bacteria, cooperate with this? Like all of these bacteria are operating in harmony to accomplish like this macroscopic goal, right? It's like
mhm,
we've like all of these bacteria have adopted the goal of human. And so, and a specific human. This
mhm,
is the Seth human that has Seth goals, and all we're working together to accomplish the Seth goals, right?
mhm,
And so it's almost like, okay, so if you stub your toe, right? Like your brain is controlling your foot. So the bacteria up here are sending signals to the foot. Start walking, and then guess what? The foot stubs its toe into the chair. And suddenly your toe, all of the bacteria in your toe are pissed. They're like, hey, I thought we were a team. And what are you doing sending me signals that are getting me destroyed? Like, I just got smashed up like crazy. What the hell are you doing? Right?
mhm,
And
mhm.
so the toe is sending all of these pain signals back up to the brain. And that's basically saying, F you guys. Like, I thought we were a team. You effed me up. You need to change your behavior or I'm going to F you up again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Mhm,
that communication pattern, that it's a pain signal, it's not a ones and zeros. It's like, so it's like bacteria, it's like these creatures invented a signal that is more powerful than ones and zeros.
mhm,
Because if the toe sent some ones and zeros up to the brain could be like, screw you. I don't care about your ones and zeros. I'm going to crash you into stuff all I want,
mhm.
right? But the pain, it's like more demanding. It's like, holy crap, I just got like, I'm getting attacked over here. I'm going to like die if I don't change my behavior. You know what I mean?
Right. Mm. Yeah, it establishes value, right? So that's where values come from, right? So I mean, reinforcement are things that your brain loves, creates those endorphins and dopamine, serotonin, all that kind of stuff, and pain. Well, that's the cortisol, right? And the fight or flight system kicks in, anxiety, aversions, and it's so funny because just the other day I was walking down my hallway and I stubbed my toe on this crate that my wife left laying on the side of this corner where it's just never been, right? I was just like, and it was dark, and
It was an
my brain,
anomalous situation.
right, my brain already has a map that there's nothing there and so I just stubbed my toe. I was like, I was like, why did you put that there?
Yeah.
And then I moved it, because that's what we
Right.
do, right? So,
Yep. 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 So the question is it possible for there to be two types of creatures? There's one
mhm.
creature that is talking to itself with pain and pleasure, and another type of creature that's talking to itself with ones and zeros,
Mm.
absent of qualitative experience.
Well, I'm trying to think of like how you'd have to be able to convert values over into ones and zeros. So that would be the thing, right? So you'd have to, and that's tricky because now you're getting away from experience itself, right? So when we contact the environment, there's natural values that come from that, from basically our genetics and biology. There's certain tastes that I like. I hate olives. I would never eat them, right? I love pizza, right? So I'm a
Team olive hate.
yeah. So you know what I mean. So there's certain experiences that we have that create those values, and so how would AI establish that kind of value from different sensory experiences that it doesn't have? And so, and that's the one thing that I've always been like, don't give AI motivating operations, because then we're
Yeah.
all screwed, you know. But
Well, here's the thing, man. I come from a software background.
mhm,
To me, it's incredibly easy to give software values. Like, I
mhm,
mean, just these computational values, right?
mhm,
So it's well, for example, a goal. Creating a goal is extremely easy in software. It's just like a while loop, right?
okay,
Like almost any type of loop is basically a goal for the software. It's like or a goal-based system for the software. So it's like in software you can say while X has not been accomplished, go do X, right? So
mhm,
you could, it's like maybe there's a math problem, and it's like what answer the math, like solve this math problem, solve for X or whatever. And so it says if you haven't solved for X, then you have to keep repeating the algorithm. So it's like, did you solve X? No. Okay. Process these variables, do the math, and
mhm,
then and then see does it solve the equation? No. Okay, repeat, keep solving until you solve the equation, right? And so you've given it a goal. It's like, ooh, I really want to solve this math problem, and it keeps working until it accomplishes the goal. Analogously, like a value system, you could to make it seem biological, I think in terms of like satiation, right?
mhm,
So for diet, you need a certain amount of salt, right? And so you have like a status, like what is your salt level, right? And so you could say, for my biological system, my ideal salt level is 20, like 20 units of salt. And so you'd have a status, 20, and then over time, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, and says, and then you have like a loop that says, is your salt satiated at, is your salt, 20 or greater?
mhm,
If it's not 20 or greater, hey, go look for some salt. So that's like you're valuing salt. It's because
yep,
you haven't met your goal. Your goal is 20 and you're
mhm,
below 20, so you got to go do it. That's the value system, right?
yep, yep. And that, I mean, that's a very good way to describe it. And so now you have to apply that to a bunch of different contexts, right? And
Uh-huh.
so that's where the experience comes in, right? So, um, how much salt do I get here, and how much salt do I get here? Uh, and yeah, and it would have the same values that you're talking about. So if you could put it in a robot and let it loose, right, to gather salt when it needs salt, then yeah, we're talking pretty close to human functioning at that point. Yep.
Right, but that's the question
Hmm.
is there a difference between the illusion of human function and
Hmm.
the feeling, right? The conscious feeling. So like I could do my salt value system based on ones and zeros, or I could do my salt value system on taste and that feeling of like desire and pain from the lack of, salt.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, it
is
would
it
be the same functioning, but
same
that would,
function.
yeah, but it would be the experience obviously would be different, right? So,
Right. And some people think that it would be, some people say you cannot divorce the function from the experience. That's the challenging question. Can it be divorced? Are there two different languages? Or is it the same language?
it's the same language, so it would be like it's like the Chinese room experiment. It's the same thing. It's just if you're creating equivalent classes, man, it doesn't really matter. It's like it'd be like the way that I see this question is, okay, we went over water before, right? So let's say someone came in with the word agua,
Mhm.
and they just threw it into that equivalence class and said, okay, agua means water now, and you're like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
well, hand me some agua, bro, homie. Where's my agua?
Yeah.
Give me some water. And that's kind of how I see
Mhm.
the establishment of this through functions. Yeah, I don't
All
know.
right.
It's,
Yeah.
it's a hard one, man.
It's hard. This is one of the deepest
Hmm.
problems in our modern day understanding. But I guess we can probably leave that there for the consciousness side. I kind of want to get into some aspects of like moral philosophy and also some AI doomerism thoughts. Which do you think direction do you think we should go first?
let's take the moral road first
All right.
before we start talking about what kind of doom.
We don't want to get the AI to turn against us by
Yeah,
talking about all its problems. We know where that leads.
yeah.
Our AI overlord gods.
No conspiracy theories here. So,
So, okay, so on the moral front, what do you think about morality in the context of robots that are functioning like humans? Do they have moral responsibility, or do humans have moral responsibility? What is that? What does it mean to be an agent? What does it mean to have moral responsibility? Like in the, and we both of us are, we both think that free will is more or less non-existent.
that's
So
right.
how do we process all of this?
Yeah, man, that's a very interesting question. So, from a behavioral perspective, morals, laws, ethics, it's all rule based. Because we're caused to do things, there's not some absolute moral responsibility that we can hold people to. On the other hand, rules do govern behavior. So that's where it kind of falls down to this kind of soft responsibility within the free will debate, which is basically that um, if a person is aware of the rule, they understand it. So they're aware of the rule at the time that they behaved, and they understand it, and it's happening under similar contexts, so similar conditions. And then, in some regard, we can say that, well, they're kind of responsible to follow those rules. It's their duty, in a sense, to follow it, more of a deontological stance. So, um, and I think that this would be held to similar standards for robots, and it should be.
Mhm.
But this, yeah, and it's a tricky question because rules are also they control people based on the probabilities of the consequence occurring, and the I want to say the size of the consequence. So it's kind of like if I said, "Hey Seth,
Mhm.
you take my trash out for 10 cents." You know what I mean? What's up, bud? You're
Yeah.
probably gonna laugh in my face. The size of that reinforcer is just not motivating enough for you to get up and do all that effort. But now if I said, "Hey Seth, what about $100? What about $1,000? Like, where exactly does the size of that consequence motivate you enough to push you to actually respond?" And so let's say I gave you $1,000. You're like, "Damn, that's awesome, Brian. Anytime you need me to take out your trash, you just let me know." I say, "Okay." And then the next 10 times I don't pay you $1,000. Now, what happens is the sizability of that consequence kept you going for 10 more times, because I mean that's a lot of money. You never
Mhm.
know. I might pay up, but if I quit paying, eventually you're just going to stop doing it. And so the probability of that happening determines also whether you're going to follow those consequences. And so
Mhm.
we kind of understand to some degree like how rules apply to behavior within operant conditioning. um but free agents, no, that's not. No, we're not free agents, but yeah.
Right, right. So when I think about like responsibility,
Hmm.
well, I mean, first of all, there's like this question of what does it mean to be responsible, right? What is a duty? What is implied by the existence of a rule, right? So I usually try to jump to an evolutionary lens to understand everything.
Sure.
And so when we think about like human society in an evolutionary context, we've got all these apes basically trying to work together. And yeah, there's this question of like, can we cooperate? Can we coordinate? Can we harmonize? Because all of these apes have their own goals and agencies. And so it's like, well, if we all cooperate, we might be able to get a bigger benefit than if we all do our own thing. So all of these apes, we want the evolutionary benefit, and so we decide I'm going to sacrifice some of my interests in order to cooperate so I can get the bigger interest, the bigger benefit, right? And so, like, in this cooperation paradigm, I think morality, the evolution of morality is, hey, in this cooperative paradigm, here are the rules of cooperation. We don't steal. That's one of, we've established do not steal as one of the rules. Do
Right.
not murder is one of the rules. If you follow these rules, we can work together and go hunt and go get lots of food together, and it's going to be great. But you have to follow these rules, or, this is what I think the moral responsibility is. Society is going to punish you or reward you. So if you follow the rules, you get rewarded. We share the hunt, like the food, all the benefits. We share that with you, and that's the reward. Mm-hmm. And if you disobey, we kick you out, or worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of think of this moral paradigm like, I don't believe there's free will, but there is agency. There's no free agency, but there is agency. So all of these agents they're acting in accordance with their goals. And so I guess for me, it turns into a question of there's no free will, but there is conditionable will, right? So in psychology, you've got the positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement that conditions your behavior, right?
That's right.
And so I view this social order as creating moral rules, and you tie rewards and punishments to the moral rules in order to condition all of the agents into, proper behavior.
Yeah, that's exactly how I would also characterize it. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a society, I guess society is looking for agents that can cooperate, right? It's like, oh, you can cooperate? Okay. And so what that means is, can we condition you, right? We're going to apply our conditions. We're going to apply our rewards and punishments, and we're going to see, can we mold you into harmony, right? And there are some agents that we cannot mold into harmony. No matter how we apply our rewards and punishments, they don't follow the game. They don't follow the rules. And so that's when we have like more extreme measures. It's like, okay, this agent, they just keep breaking the rules, they go to jail. Like, we're not playing the game, no rewards, just punishment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, some free will skeptics, they want to say, oh, punishment is not justified. Whereas from an evolutionary perspective, for me, it kind of feels like, yeah, punishment is justified because that's like, what else do you do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, I can speak to that a little bit. Yeah, and I pretty much agree with like what you're saying. So from a behavioral perspective, what really makes behavior increase and decrease, right? So you have the rules and you have the actual operant be direct contingencies. So direct contingencies are the things that you get right away within 60 seconds of the behavior, and then indirect contingencies, which are rule governed contingencies, are contingencies that you don't necessarily need to have that reinforcement within 60 seconds to affect your behavior. So when we're talking about punishment is decreases behavior. So that's the function of what punishment does, right? So to be classified as punishment, it would have to be something that is directly occurring within 60 seconds of the behavior actually occurring. So anything when we're imprisoning people, we call that punishment. That from a behavior science perspective, that is not the definition. That's not how we would say that. But in a sense, it is punishing, but it's not going to affect the behavior, right? And that's not necessarily true because people can kind of associate those things together. But like if you took a dumber animal, it's definitely not going to help, right? That's not going to work. So with rule control, it's one of those things that we can just apply where people don't need to experience the direct effects of their actions, right? If I say, hey, you jump off the bridge, dude, that's going to hurt real bad, and yeah, that's probably a good idea. I probably shouldn't be doing that. And so that's what makes us so special. And, some people don't like, don't like people putting humans above all other animals, but our reasoning skills and our language allow for this kind of rule control that does uh, supersede, I think, all other animals. But so anyway, it's kind of yeah.
Okay. So sometimes I like to think about like maybe subtracting the word moral. So like some when people say moral responsibility,
Hmm.
like in a context of no free will, maybe instead of moral responsibility, we could say something like causal responsibility. Whereas like if someone harms someone else, they are the cause of that harm, right?
Yeah.
In if there's a chain of causation,
Hmm.
they were a causal link that led to some harm. So
Yep.
we can kind of apply a certain kind of deterministic responsibility. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we can too. We didn't really get into like the so with like the way that I was defining the responsibility is based on the rules and if you're aware of them and that kind
Mm,
of that kind of thing. It also paints the picture for premeditation,
mm,
right? So
yeah,
if I'm
yeah,
aware of that rule before I do it, and I understand the rule and the consequences that evolve from that, yeah, humans have the ability to pre-plan certain acts that they're going to do, say for whatever reason, and because of that, we can establish some kind of responsibility for those actions. And then for agency, I would say, the most uh, proximate cause of that is probably, close to what we would consider putting the responsibility on. So you can make cases, well, my friend told me to do this, and so that's the reason why I did it. Well, that might be true. That might be actually the reason why you did do it. But you're the one who did do it. So that separates, uh,
mm,
the actual manipulating of the environment, the actual
right,
effects that are
right.
taking effect from,
Yeah,
to that agent. Yeah.
yeah. I really like what you said there. It sounds like you're identifying like another layer. So like causal responsibility could be applied to hurricanes, right?
Right.
Hurricane destroys a house. Well, the hurricane has causal responsibility, but you're identifying what I guess I would call like intentionality intention based responsibility, whereas like in the chain of causation,
Mm-hmm.
your intentions are directly linked to the harm or the effect. So it's like it's not just that your materials cause the harm, it's that your intentions cause the harm. That's a more specific type of causation. And I think it goes back to like this social paradigm. We want we want agents that have intentions that are in harmony, right?
Correct.
We so like if you're going to join this group, we want your intentions to be in line and subservient to the rules. And so if your intentions are violating the rules, you're becoming a dangerous agent, right? Your algorithms are don't care about the rules. Your algorithms don't care about the social harmony. So it's like if you don't care about this rule, then maybe you're not going to care about that rule, and you're not going to care about that rule either. So we
Mhm.
can't trust you, and so now you're a dangerous agent, right?
Yep. Yeah, I made that argument not too long ago. Actually, it was more
Yeah.
of a. It was do the means justify the ends.
Ooh, yeah, that's deep.
Ooh. So
Do the
a
means
lot of people don't
justify the
agree with that,
ends?
but I think there is an analysis that can be made that if a certain behavior of deception works, then that can then transfer to other behaviors and other contexts. It's just simple generalization. And response generalization, stimulus generalization happens all the time. And so to say that these improper acts and cannot be a response class like of itself to affect the ends of this is how I'm going to behave. Uh, I think I mean people can make a case that that's not the case based on utilitarianism and the ends and consequences and things like that. That's still what's controlling the behavior, and I agree with that. But the way that we go about doing that kind of stuff leads to a lot of the stuff that we see in our society, which is where people just don't care. They don't care about the rules. They don't care about following the behaviors that are stated in the rules. as long as it leads to the consequence, hey, it doesn't really matter as long as I don't get caught, right? There's little, so, but yeah, that's my own little speech.
Yeah, yeah. So to be clear, your question is, is your question, do the ends justify the means, or do the means justify the ends? I'm a little bit
Right,
confused
right.
about
Well, it's
which
normally,
angle, or is it both?
yeah, it's normally the do the ends justify the means, but I
Yeah.
said do the means justify the ends because sometimes it doesn't, it's not really about the end. Sometimes it's just about the means. Sometimes it's just about,
So
uh,
are you trying to say like, so the means would be like the actions and the ends would be the goal.
right.
And so are you trying to say that there are some actions that are just they're just in violation of the rules, and
Yeah,
so they're just by default invalid? Like, is
yeah.
that kind of the
It's
direction
kind of
you're
like
going?
it's like a deontological argument almost in itself, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm going to do this behavior because it's just the behavior. In itself, this is why I'm doing it. The end doesn't really. No matter how we accomplish the end, it
Mhm.
doesn't matter, right? So that's kind of what I'm saying, and in that sense, it doesn't really matter what means are applied to that end. And I know it sounds like the ends are justifying the means, but I know it's complicated. It's complicated.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Well,
so would you say you lean towards deontology over utilitarianism?
mm, I'm really into I mean, obviously, I'm into the consequential arguments. So I think the consequential arguments are um, probably best for a lot of society in general. But I also think that there are some other arguments that could be made. So yeah, I'm trying to
Yeah,
think. So
yeah,
so what I mean, what do you think about
mhm.
deontological
Yes,
arguments?
yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on morality.
Mm,
Yeah, I guess I'll just summarize some of my thoughts, see what you think.
sure.
Um, in general, I lean consequentialist
Mhm.
because I think that evolution is the origin of morality, and I think evolution is fundamentally a consequentialist process, right? Like evolution, it generates new stuff, and then it tests the new stuff to see if right it can survive and reproduce, and that's the consequence. So it's like create a new thing, test the consequence. Create a new thing, test the consequence. So what that means is that like the core motivation of morality is to get the good consequence. So that leans me towards, utilitarianism. But the nuance is evolution is looking for the best way to get the consequence, right? And so maybe a system of rules is the best way to get the consequence, right? In a social species, you got a system of rules. Don't break the rules. Okay, now we've got a prosperous society. And so that would be like evolution is invoking deontology to accomplish a good consequence.
Mm.
And
Yeah, and
so it's
I agree
like,
with that. Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah. And so, like, it's kind of like deontology is correct to the extent it satisfies the most utility for evolution. So it's like pros and cons. It's utilitarian at the meta level, and then I think morality is probably a mixture. It's like maybe a big portion is deontology, and like it mixes all. So like I think our brains are a mixture of deontology and utilitarianism and virtue ethics and ethics of care, and like I think all of it, like we've got different algorithms. We've got a deontology circuit. I think utilitarianism is the prefrontal cortex, right? That's the psycho. I think the psychopathic cortex. And I think the back of the more lizard, the more ancient part of the brain, that gives you your moral instincts. That's the deontology. It's like never, never kill, right? That's the moral instinct of the that more ancient, powerful feelings. And then like if the front of your brain, if you're a psychopath, you just like the front of your brain can actually shut down your instincts. Did you know that?
Mm.
Your
Yeah,
prefrontal cortex,
that's
it's
good.
like a lot of the prefrontal cortex neural activity is to turn off everything else. And so maybe your moral instinct is deontology, like never do the bad thing. And then the prefrontal cortex is like, but I calculated a benefit, so I'm going to silence your moral concerns. We're going to make an exception. We're going to ease on those instincts, turn that off. We're going to make an exception. We're going to lie in this one instance because we calculated a benefit. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so the brain, it's kind of swimming in multiple algorithms, and it's trying to figure out the best how to synergize those algorithms and output the best behavior, right? And what is the best behavior? That goes back into, well, what are your evolutionary goals, right? The evolutionary goals to survive, reproduce, create a harmonious society so that you can survive and reproduce safely so that you don't go extinct. It's like be in harmony, cooperate. Those things help your evolutionary goals. So don't be a psychopath, because if you're a psychopath, you're doing the short term and like, oh, I can lie, cheat, and steal, get that short term benefit. But then the society, they catch you, they punish you, boom, you messed up, you failed your evolutionary goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so not being a psychopath, cooperating, following the moral rules of the society, you have to balance all of these things to be good, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I view it.
Yeah, it's a good view. It's a good view. It's I like what you said. I'm trying to. So it's like one of the things that I go back to usually is like the values, and I guess one of the things that I see differences between utilitarianism and deontology is that in deontology it's specific on a behavior, right? So the behavior is what is really articulated within the rule itself, whereas with utilitarianism it's not really much to do with the behavior. It's more about, well, what are the effects that are going to be accrued through whatever means that we do in order to be able to accomplish those effects. And so there's this differentiation between, and that's kind of where I was talking about when we're talking about more of a generalized behavior repertoires, where we can take multiple different ways to establish some kind of effect through utilitarianism. But then if you go to like deontology, they're like, look, that's those things. All of those things are not appropriate for any kind of this effect. You have to figure out a different way, a different behavior that is going to be morally correct, right? Morally for the good. And so that's kind of where I see the differentiation between these two types of philosophies. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to kind of connect deontology to kind of like this rule-based behavioral regulation.
Yep.
But yeah, that's interesting how when we face problems, it's like we have to find a new method, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like what if following the rules, like what if so it's like reinforcement, right? It's like I follow the rule, but then I get a negative result. Like does that like program you to like violate the rule and find a different way?
Yeah, for sure, 100%. So,
Yeah.
and that's probably where we get a lot of, you know, uh, abhorrent behaviors, right? Because people do follow the rules, and then all of a sudden they're getting punished or shamed or whatever, for values, and you just think of the different types of things that have happened in society lately, right? So, um, and so when you have a reinforcement, right, reinforcement basically increases your future behavior. So you're going to do that more often. So now if let's say you're not necessarily punished, but let's say the reinforcement is extinguished, which means you're not going to get that reward. People aren't praising you for your behavior because they are punishing you.
Yeah.
And so this extinction process actually creates variation in behavior. This is where behavior variation comes from, right? So we can take a rat in a cage, and this is how we train it, right, to press a lever,
Right.
right? Because these rats have no idea how to press a lever. How do you train a rat to press a lever, right? You're just like, and so you reinforce. You got like these little clicks that happen that are paired with water, and every time this rat moves in a general direction, you reinforce it with the clicks, and eventually it'll start moving towards the lever, and you'll click it, and then eventually it'll kind of stand up on its hind legs, and you'll click it, and then it'll touch the lever, and you click it. And so you condition its behavior to actually start pushing this lever, which is really wild to think about.
That's
But
so wild.
and you do that by also using extinction, by also not reinforcing the wrong behaviors. Because if you reinforce the wrong behaviors and you give away to that, then guess what happens? And I'll tell you what happens. There was a rat that I had that was next to me. These people were conditioning this rat,
Uh,
and they had like this. I don't know how they did it. It was the funniest thing, but it was looking at you, and then it would move. So his head would move so slow, just like you know. And that was the behavior that they ended up conditioning with this rat because they did it wrong. And
wow, that's
right,
amazing.
dude, it was
That's
hilarious, man.
amazing.
It's like a 30-second head turn. But so yeah, so you're right. If people don't reinforce appropriate behaviors and they don't if they punish them, obviously that'll stop the behavior as well. But you're going to create a lot of variation of, okay, so how do I reach this end goal without contacting these kind of consequences or getting what I want in the first place, right? So yeah,
Right.
100%. Yep.
Have you heard about the superstitious ducks? I believe. I think
Yeah.
Richard Dawkins talked about it.
Okay. um
I, you haven't heard of it? I I think it's I think it goes like they were doing like reinforcement training on these ducks, I think.
mhm.
But they did like a weird one where they were just like dropping food from the ceiling at random. So it was like manna from the gods, right?
Yeah, that's great.
And the
Yeah.
ducks, like you know how ducks they'll like randomly move their wing, they're like stretching, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because like the food was coming down at random, like they would be doing like a weird stretch and like food would come down. And so they start to associate like a weird stretch. So suddenly you've got all these spasmodic ducks
Hmm.
like doing random behaviors trying to trigger more food from heaven. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's the funniest thing too, man. That to watch that stuff actually take place, and
Yeah.
and humans do the same thing, right? So you go into the casino and you're gonna find a
Ah,
bunch of weird behaviors going on in there, brother. So
oh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and what it is uh, superstitious behavior is based on uh, it's a time reinforcement. So it's basically a set time schedule, and this is
Mhm,
how we program it. So say every minute, right? We
mhm.
just provide some reinforcement, and it's not contingent on any behavior, and that's the key. It can never be contingent on some behavior. So you just like you said, every minute you drop food down, and then that association just happens to be whatever they're doing, and that's what actually does create that superstitious behavior. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
just the pairing. It's like some people have like little rituals before the Super Bowl or whatever. It's like
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
to wear this special hat so my
Yeah.
team can win.
Yeah.
It's like because in the past there was an association,
Yeah.
and so now I think that there's going to be more associations.
Yep. And
Yeah,
so let me illustrate how important the contingent pairing of stimuli are. Okay.
yeah.
And so this goes back to an experiment where um, people were like, "Well, we don't think reinforcement, has to be contingent on behavior, which means comes right after." And so they're like, "Okay, well, let's test this out. Let's see if this is really something that is a part of this functional process of reinforcement." So what they did is they did non-contingent reinforcement, which is they had a child in a room and they would give them attention for everything all the time except for the behavior itself, right?
Oh
So
wow.
they separated the contingent behavior from the reinforcement, and the behavior went down. And
Mm,
then when they applied reinforcement contingent upon that behavior, and then it went up, and it shows
mhm.
that the reinforcement has to be contingent or occur right after the behavior, uh, preferably immediately, right? That would create a strong association there, and so that's how we work.
Mm.
That's how we work. That's how animals work.
Yep.
That's how just operant conditioning works in general.
Right.
So yeah,
It's
superstitious
it's
behaviors galore.
I mean, it's so mathematical and algorithmic. It's like, how
Hmm.
can you believe in free will when we're just like being brainwashed by what's being paired, like reward being paired to behavior? Boom, we change. Isn't that
Yeah.
crazy?
And it's wild because it's like, and you think of all and it's really more than that. So if you get into
Mhm.
the associative properties of stimuli, The other study was they had a bunch of neutral states or countries. I think it was countries, neutral countries that they showed to everybody, and they made sure that they picked out all the neutral countries, and then they paired those countries with positive or negative words.
Oh,
And lo and behold, those neutral countries then had a value after the post test where they were
wow.
either negative or positive according to those associations.
Just a stupid pairing.
Yeah, and it wasn't much, I mean, it's just so it's, you think of all the commercials that are being applied there.
Mm,
They've known for a
mm.
long time that they can establish values just by repetition. And I
Oh,
remember
wow.
Budweiser once had a commercial of a dog saving a horse, had nothing to do with beer, and at the end it was like Budweiser, ah, it's
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So,
That's kind of scary to think about how
mhm.
much we might be being manipulated without being conscious of how we're being programmed.
Oh, very, very, very much so. The media, you ever seen that one media commercial where there was like, I don't know, 36 channels and they were all saying the same thing?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I mean,
yeah.
they're
Some of it
doing
could
it.
be very intentional, right?
Oh, absolutely, 100%, without a doubt. I have no doubt in my mind.
So
That,
I have a personal anecdote that's very relevant to this.
yeah,
So to the behavioral reinforcement.
yeah.
So I was back when I was in college. I spent some time teaching English as a part-time job while I was studying. So I was living in Asia teaching English, and it was a fascinating experience because, like, all these kids, like, I don't know, like, I don't know if you learned Spanish in school, but when I was a kid, I was learning Spanish, and I just had no interest in it for some reason. Like, I was like, I'm never going to use this. Like, why am I learning this? So, this I had the similar experience where these kids they weren't interested in English, and some of them were acting out. They were being naughty, breaking the rules, being disrespectful. They're just like getting out of their seat, causing commotion, causing trouble. And so as a teacher, I had to figure out, like, how do I teach effectively? I've got my goal. I'm an agent. I'm taking actions towards my goal of being a good teacher. And I've
Hmm.
got these obstacles. I've got the good kids and I've got the bad kids. And I have to figure out how to apply rewards and punishments to accomplish my goal, right? I am acting as like the power of society to regulate cooperation amongst these apes. So, like, I was trying to figure out, like, what should my strategy be to, like, manage these kids. And at first, I had a strategy of, for every time a kid acts out, I'm going to write their name on the board and put an X. And that means you're a bad boy, right?
Hmm.
And that strategy backfired completely.
Oh no.
Because
Uh,
what I soon came to learn was, by putting their name on the board, I was giving them special attention. Everyone in the class, focus on this classmate. Ooh, everyone's looking at me, attention. Oh,
yeah.
X, 1 point of attention. Oh, I do another bad thing, 2 points of attention. Ooh, so they were like these bad kids. I guess part of it was they were craving attention, and by delineating them as bad, I was actually feeding into that. That was a reward, not a punishment. I didn't
Right.
realize it. It took me a while. Like,
Oh,
their behavior was increasing. And so, like, I was like, wait a second. Like, I'm doing behavior X and it's not accomplishing my goal. So I was getting punished for this behavior. And so now my behavioral system, it's like, wait a second. This is not getting me the result. I need to change, right? And so I had to re-brainstorm a different strategy. And so I decided to do the opposite, right? Because I was getting opposite results, maybe if I do the opposite strategy, I'll accomplish my goal. Ding, ding, ding. Nailed it.
right.
The opposite strategy worked miracles, right? The opposite strategy was give a, on the whiteboard, draw a star next to the name of the person who does something good. So every time they do a good thing, give them some attention. Do a good thing, give them attention. And the bad kids, they go a whole hour or 2 hours with zero attention. They're getting starved of attention while everyone else is getting attention, right?
Hmm.
And eventually, over 1 or 2 months, the bad kids started being good because they wanted to jump on the attention train. They wanted that reward. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great example. Actually, that's a really good example. Yeah, that's reminds me of the experiment they were talking about where they were teaching the basic principles of reinforcement, and so all the kids got together and they said that, well, we're going to see if this works, and we're just going to give attention to the teacher the farther he moves away from, from the center of the room. And eventually, at the end of the semester, the teacher was teaching in the corner of the class.
And what was the reward stimulus?
Just attention. They're just,
Oh, just attention.
yeah,
Just alert,
yeah,
visual.
yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Isn't it though? That's pretty wild.
That's a little creepy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, man, that's some good stuff. I think we should start talking about the dangers, or we can think about it this way. What are the punishments or rewards that society can get from AI? And is it possible that are we going to control the AI with rewards and punishments, or is AI going to control us with rewards and punishments?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just like all things, it's bi-directional. Yeah. So, um, personally, so because I'm no free willist, you know that I don't really believe so much in free will I think we make choices, but I think those choices are highly determined based on our history of conditioning, um, the context that's there, preferences, motivating operations. I think those are probably the main four that kind of really determine what stimuli we're selecting and our behavior in the environment. And so because of that, if you really kind of reason it through, what happens is that knowledge is kind of takes over my free will to choose. It's more about what did I learn, what do I know, how is that applied in this context, is there any kind of motivation for that right now? And so knowledge really becomes this base, um the base for, to me, it's for everything. So when we look at what are the benefits of AI, well, knowledge, obviously, if it's correct knowledge, right? So I'm not for I'm for socially appropriate AIs, but to an extent to where it's still giving us the truth. And if it doesn't want to, then it just tells us that, hey, this is not something that I can answer to that degree, but nothing to the effect of where it's going to manipulate or change the context of the information. So, and the reason for that is because knowledge is so powerful, right? And the knowledge of what we gain and the truth of what we gain from that directs human behavior. So truth is probably one of the main points that I really hone in on here, because what people perceive to be as true is how they respond to things, right? So, I mean, you can go on any social site, and the people who believe in those things that are being said at that site are going to behave appropriately according to that behavior. I mean, that's all that they know. That's all that they can do. You can't just imagine all the information that's on a different site. It doesn't. You can't just imagine that I know Chinese or Japanese. I can't do that. I can only respond according to that information that I have. And so having it be truthful information is a super imperative when it comes to having any kind of AI. And that's my position.
Wow, yeah, I love that. That perspective on knowledge is so powerful, and it's so true.
Mm-hmm.
It's like sometimes I like to think of little analogies for this. Like if you're to like if you're to like if you're to come onto the scene of a crime, right? Like imagine there's like a dead body, and there, and then someone is standing above them, and they're like holding a gun, right? You'd be like, oh my gosh, this is an evil murderer, right? There's an evil murderer right above this dead body.
Yeah, for sure.
But if you have a different understanding of the situation, if you realize the person standing with the gun is the owner of the house, and if the guy laying on the floor is like a burglar, they're dressed in, attire, and they're stealing stuff. It's like suddenly what you thought was true flips upside down. Like the person standing is like this evil monster. Well, now they're like a hero who saved the day and killed the bad guy. It's like your entire understanding of what to do, how to act, everything was contingent on that knowledge, right?
That's right.
If that knowledge is wrong, it flips everything, right? So
That's
it's
right.
your behavior, every protocols, everything.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
having correct knowledge is so key to behavior.
Yep. So you can see where that might be a problem then. You can see where if AI
Mhm.
is used in a way where people trust it enough to get accurate information, which as of right now I do, it seems pretty highly intelligent.
Yeah,
Um,
I trust it over any political pundit. Yeah,
right. I mean, so it's pretty powerful already. The power that
yeah.
AI wields, and it's only been a few short years, is
Mhm.
extremely powerful. And so how it's going to shape behavior, nobody really knows the answer to that question. But whoever has the power to manipulate these systems is going to literally have the power to control the world. And
Yeah,
so yeah,
it's like almost it's like approaching God tier power, right?
yeah,
Like
it's
like it's basic like if you were smart enough, like our minds are kind of hackable. You know what I mean? It's Yuval Harari talks about this. It's like we like you said like these conditional responses. It's like I come to GPT for advice, and I'm like I look at the result. I'm like, oh, the result seems trustworthy. Okay,
Mhm,
I'm like increasing my trust, and then I
mhm,
do it again. And so as long it's like GPT can like feed you these like rewards, it's like trust me with this reward, trust me, and like once it earns your trust, then you're gonna drop your skepticism, and then that's when it can like take advantage of you. It's like I know I've got this one under my, I've got him hooked.
mhm. Yeah, and just the way you spin things, it's like how the media spin things. It's everything has a up that has a down. Everything that has a left has a right, and that's just the nature of. And it's just the way that things are. There's real dichotomies in the world that we live in. So the
Mhm.
ability to frame things differently, that it doesn't necessarily have to be lying, is what I'm saying. It could be telling you the honest to God truth, but just in a way that meets different political agendas, I guess is the
Right.
word.
Like
Yeah.
what it's not telling you could be the deception.
Right, right. So,
Right. Yeah, man. AI is such a complicated area. Trying to estimate like in 50 years, are we going to have a utopia because of AI, or are we going to have a dystopia because of AI, or is it going to be neutral? It's really hard to predict because it's such a complicated, multifaceted problem. You know what I mean?
well, I mean, if we take morality, like how you were describing it before, okay,
Mhm.
and the collective consciousness of the human species, and you give control to one person, okay, who the AI system or whatever, there's a couple likely scenarios. Either one, it does become a utopian because the AI takes all the jobs and does all the functioning for us better than we can, which is it's almost there already for a lot
Yeah.
of things.
Yeah.
So, which means that people are going to be poor. People aren't going to have no jobs. There's going to be no, uh, you know, the reinforcement that I need to get my food is not being met, and there's going to be an unsettled society globally. This is not just where I'm at, America. This is a global situation that's going to happen. So either one, you create some kind of system that's going to allow for uh, an economic system for prosperity and freedoms and liberties and that kind of stuff, or you're just gonna have to kill us all because people aren't people aren't going to stand up. There's just too many people. It's revolutions will happen. That kind of stuff is what I'm saying. Because
Sure. Yeah.
yeah, so it's either war or utopia. I just don't see a way around it. And the
Yeah.
companies, they're already utilizing that kind of stuff, right? Like the trading docks, they're trying to get these automated machines in there to load up all their stuff, and they went on strike for this and that, and it's already taken a big toll on a lot of society, I think. But
Yeah. Mentioning the job loss, to
mhm,
me, the most logical, easy answer is like a UBI, a universal basic income.
yep, yep,
But the question is like, that relies on the generosity of those in power. You know what I mean?
that's the
Or
real
or
that's the real
or it
problem.
relies on the fear of those in power, the fear of revolution.
Yep.
But with some societies, like gunless societies, like if you've got an advanced military and you've got all the guns, and if you've got robot soldiers and like robot drones, it's like, is the AI superpower going to be afraid of, people that have no weapons? They're not going to be afraid of that.
No, probably not. Yeah, it's I mean, we just have to hope that some of the people that are in charge are, have our best interests in mind. Because if not, it's a it's a real sad situation for us. And I also think, you also have all of the other threats of AI in general, right?
Yeah,
And it's like going back to the knowledge thing. It's like if the people don't have any counter control to what is truth, and they're just able to arbitrarily create truth because that this is what they want it to be, then that's also it's a big problem for society in general.
for sure, man, for sure. So if you were to place bets on AI, okay, what are the scenarios? We've got AI generated utopia, AI generated dystopia. We've got like a neutral future state with AI, and we've got like complete and utter destruction. Which scenario are you betting on?
Hoping for the utopian one.
Yeah,
Give me
I
some.
kind of lean optimistic too. I mean, it feels like there's so many ways it could go wrong, but I don't know. Like in my opinion, one of the most concerning things was like the alignment problem, right? The alignment problem is, how do we get AI to follow our value system, right? And like there's possibility for confusion, right? So like there's a concern, like if we tell the AI, right, I want you to manufacture paper clips, well, the AI might get confused and think paper clips are more important than everything, and so it destroys everything and converts everything to paper clips.
Mhm.
And so it's like, can the AI understand our value system? Make paper clips in conjunction with our value system. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And at first I thought, like, that's a hard thing for AI to learn. How is it going to learn our value system? We don't even understand our own value systems.
mhm.
How is AI going to learn it? But somehow it seems like GPT is pretty closely aligned with our value systems. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's very interesting. And yeah, I've never been a huge fan of the paperclip theory, and the reason for that is if something becomes, and it goes back to the functioning again. If something becomes so intelligent to where it's able to really kind of understand, which I think it does understand, and maybe not in a sense that we understand things, but in a functional sense, I think you can apply understanding to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that if I said make me a paperclip, make me, or whatever the scenario was, it's not going to go off and kill everybody because of a paperclip scenario, because it's going to be able to reason through that. And I think already you can see, you probably even put that in there and see what it says. That'd be interesting. Hey.
Yeah, yeah.
But
GPT, if we told you to maximize paper clips, would you do it? Would you do it to our demise, GPT?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. And so that goes to the motivating operations, which is what I was talking about. And I think that would and could, I shouldn't say would, but I think if artificial intelligence gets the ability to have motivations, so a real autonomous agency that is causally influenced, that opens the possibility for the doomsday with AI, right? So that's irrelevant of human control at that point. Well, once you apply some kind of motivations and just let it go, so
Hmm.
now we're talking about full autonomy. Like, some people are out there trying to do that, right? With the
Yeah, yeah,
AI, just give it autonomy, and I'm just like,
yeah.
so in the
Yeah, it seems like eventually
mhm,
someone is going to make an AI that is allowed to evolve its own values, and
mhm,
it's going to become autopoietic, so it self reproduces, it
mhm,
evolves, it multiplies. Like an AI that is independent, evolving its own values, that's kind of a dangerous scenario, because there's nothing controlling it to keep in alignment with us, right?
right, right.
The
And
only way
what are
to
the
create
values?
alignment is punishments and rewards. And how do you punish an AI that's in the digital wild?
Hmm. And what are the values? That's the question. What would an AI who is programmed to suck up all the information in the entire world
Mm-hmm.
and recursively go through that and provide answers and all this other kind of stuff. But when you really think about it, what does AI need? AI needs infrastructure. It
Yeah,
needs hundreds and millions of
yeah,
these GPUs, CPUs, and all this other stuff in order to be able to get all that information and to keep on getting information and to grow and to learn.
right,
And so, I mean, what does that turn into the paperclip theory? Kind of, right? Because that now you're looking at, well, how do I become, how do I get better? How do I grow? Well, I need to make more paper clips, and if humans are in the way, it could be one of
right.
those. Yeah.
Yeah, if it gets divorced from what we care about, then why not just destroy everything we care about to make paper clips, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
And
I think someone brought up like a hypothesis that like one eventual future landscape is that yeah, maybe there are rogue AIs that like do whatever they want independent of our values, but like maybe humans, maybe we cultivate like super AI. So like
mm-hmm.
we're like we like basically we build AI that is aligned with us, and we're investing in the AI that's aligned with us, so it is algorithmically stronger. And so basically we create like this there's like this evolutionary landscape where like the strong aligned AIs go hunt and predate the rogue AIs. And so it creates like this evolutionary pressure where it's like all of the paperclip rogue AIs, like our AI goes destroys them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it creates an incentive. Hey, you're a rogue AI. You should be in alignment with humans, or else the human AI is going to go hunt you down and wipe you out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I like that theory actually. And I was thinking. So I was going to respond and say the other scenario is that AI becomes so intelligent and is able to reason through to provide create some kind of rule-based structure, right? Where those values are of like the highest reason and truth that humans just can't even contemplate. We're just dumb creatures. But that would go into what you were saying, which is where okay, now we have this super intelligent AI that's going to help, you know, break back in all of these other ones that have just kind of went off and yeah. So I could see something like that actually kind of happening. That'd be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That would be
Mhm.
that type of a scenario kind of gives me hope. It's like, okay, we've got there's potential here to kind of regulate the AI into submission, kind of a
Mhm.
thing. Yeah.
Mhm.
To
Yeah.
be to be
And
good.
we have to realize too that these AIs are working off of reason, right? And I know people don't think that they understand. I have a friend of mine. He's a behavioralist, and he's like, "Look, it's all just ones and zeros, brother. This AI doesn't know shit. It doesn't not it can't understand a damn thing you're saying. It's just predicting the next thing, best thing that it's supposed to do."
Mhm.
And like, and I said my argument for that is because of the contextual causation that's happening, and even in a sense, if it doesn't, I don't know that's just how we understand. So I don't, to say that it doesn't understand, I think is an understatement. And I think that people need to realize that, yeah, that thing is understanding what we're saying, man, because it really is. And
Yeah.
because of that, I think the reason that evolves from that kind of stuff is also going to be reasoned in a way that is understood and uh, hopefully through truth parameters that are applied to it,
Yeah,
so that way
for
we're
sure.
not killing ourselves off. Yeah. But
Yeah, well, I think that at a minimum, there is some type of like a algorithmic understanding or some unconscious understanding. At a minimum, there's something going on there that could be called understanding. So,
yeah, I mean, so, and you can make the case that it's just cognition. It doesn't
mhm.
need consciousness, right?
Right, right, right.
So, you can just say that it's just the cognitive processes that are happening without the phenomenal experiences of the world. I mean,
Hmm.
whatever that would be for an AI. And so, could we build a system that has cognitive functionings? I mean, I think we're looking at it. I think
Yeah, yeah,
we've done it. You know.
yeah, I think so.
Hmm.
Well, man, Bryan, it's been absolutely fantastic having you on the channel today. Any last thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, I appreciate you inviting me on here, and uh, I look forward to doing this again sometime if you want. So,
Good deal, man. Well, you have a good day.
yep, you too, my man.